If you go hunting through old maps, Portuguese travelogues, Arab chronicles, and classroom textbooks for a king named Malota of Zambari, you'll discover something unsettling. There is no trace of him, no carved name on a soapstone bird, no terse line in a Jesuit report, no coral, walled palace foundation with his royal seal. The deeper you dig, the clearer it becomes that the phrase, King Malota of Zambari, is a ghost, an echo formed from misheard syllables and misplaced geography. But that ghost points straight to a very real giant. Across the Zambezi Valley in the mid-1400s, a hunter, prince left the granite plazas of Great Zimbabwe, moved north in search of salt and game, and forged a new state that would command trade from the interior to the Indian Ocean. His name was Nyatsimba Mutota, not Malota, Mutota, and his domain was not Zambari. It was the Mutapa Kingdom rising along the Zambezi, the river whose broad, silt, rich floodplains formed the backbone of a trading empire. Many people outside southern Africa have never heard of him, but if our mysterious title were a cipher, King Malota of Zambari would decode almost perfectly to King Mutota of the Zambezi. So let's treat the ghost as a doorway. Step through it, and you meet the man behind the blur, Nyatsimba Mutota, hunter, conqueror, state, builder, and the kingdom he sparked, known to outsiders by many names: Mutapa, Minor Mutapa, Monomotapa. This is the story of the king you were meant to forget, and the world he built that shaped gold roots, coastal cities, and the politics of an entire region. The confusion starts with language. Mutota and Malota are one vowel apart. Zambezi and Zanzibar are one sailing wind apart. Portuguese scribes transcribed African courts with ears tuned to Lisbon. Arab geographers wrote with the cadences of the Swahili coast. European mapmakers stitched rumors to coastlines. In that noisy process, names bent. Over time, a powerful, well-documented king could easily become a jumbled rumor in the margins. Strip away the noise, though, and a coherent picture emerges. Begin at Great Zimbabwe, a city of dry, stone genius whose elliptical walls still rise in patient curves from the savannah. By the 15th century, the political center of gravity in this plateau began to shift. Oral traditions say Mutota, royal kin from the house that ruled at Great Zimbabwe, moved north in search of salt. Then won loyalties and levies among the Shona-speaking communities he encountered. What started as a hunt became a march. What began as trade became tribute. From this expansion, a kingdom crystallized Mutapa. Under Mutota and his son, Mutapa Mutota, the state expanded over waterways and overland tracts that pulsed with ivory and, crucially, gold, the metal that drew eyes from Arabia, India, and, eventually, Europe. Picture the map not as flat parchment, but as a living network. Inland, miners and merchants extracted gold from rivers and reefs. Caravans threaded through Miombo woodlands, their bales packed with elephant tusks, iron tools, cloth, and beads. Out on the coast, Swahili cities, Kilwa in earlier centuries, Sofala and Quelimane in Mutapa's heyday, acted like valves, opening inland wealth to the Indian Ocean. Dhows rode the monsoon winds, hoisting lateen sails toward Gujarat. and the Hadramat, their hulls carrying ivory, rhinoceros horn, and gold dust out, and textiles, beads, and ceramics in. The Mutapa court sat at the inland end of that pipeline. Control the interior nodes, tax the flows, and you control the future. That was Mutota's genius. To govern, the Mutapa state relied on a lattice of provincial chiefs bound by tribute and royal favor. The title, Win, Sir Lord signaled authority. Mutapa meant the realm. Tribute arrived in the capital in gold, cattle, and captives. In return, the king bestowed regalia and recognition. It wasn't a static monarchy. It was an organism, flexing, absorbing, and, when necessary, striking. When a chief refused tribute, the Mutapa king sent regiments. When a territory complied, he sent praise and protection. That mix of carrot and cudgel underwrote an expanding frontier that would, by the late 1400s, press toward the Indian Ocean's edge. So, if King Malota of Zambari never ruled, why keep the title in our mouths? Because it captures a feeling, the sense that Africa's interior hides kings, equal to any emperor in a museum wing, whose names have been muffled by distance and by design. Because correcting the record is itself an act of remembering. When we swap Malota for Mutota, Zambari for Zambezi, we are not nitpicking, we are resurrecting. And because once you learn the name Mutota, doors open to others. The Rosvi commanders, who later swept the interior clean of Portuguese forts. The coastal merchants who negotiated, resisted, or partnered as their fortunes demanded. The builders of Great Zimbabwe, who, with nothing but skill and stone, raised a city that still humbles modern engineers. What would it mean to restore Mutota to the global pantheon? It would mean placing the Mutapa Kingdom on the same mental shelf as Mali, Songhai, Benin Oyo, Kanem, Bornu, and Aksum. Each a proof that African statecraft was sophisticated, adaptive, and plugged into the world's arteries on its own terms. It would mean teaching trade not just as spice routes that emanate from Venice, but as webs that converge on Sofala and radiate out again, with African signatures on every bale. It would mean admitting that Europe arrived late to a party already in full swing, where the bouncers spoke Shona and Swahili, and the guest list stretched from the Limpopo to Gujarat. Now, step back and look at the timeline. In the 1400s, Mutota plants a flag in the valley. In the late 1400s and 1500s, Mutapa waxes powerful as inland broker. In the late 1500s, Portuguese incursions meet African realities, disease, distance, and determined resistance. In the late 1600s, the Rosvii and allied forces burn out Portuguese inland posts and push coastal power back to the littoral. Through it all, Mutapa survives in shifting forms, sometimes shrinking, sometimes splintering, but never simply vanishing. That's not a footnote, that's a headline. What remains today is not a palace you can tour with a headset, but patterns you can still see if you know where to look. Settlement clusters near old river fords, gold traces in river bends, shards of imported ceramics far from salt spray, Shona praise songs that place ancestors in specific valleys and hills. The Mutapa Kingdom is not a myth. It is a cartography of power that once mapped itself onto bodies, goods, and ground. Mutota is not a rumor. He is the name at the beginning of a ledger whose entries filled a century. So, the next time someone tells you African history is unknown or mysterious, resist the urge to nod. Ask them which part they mean. The cities whose stonework refuses to fall, or the courts whose politics was so deft that early modern Europe could neither fully conquer nor fully comprehend them. Ask them whether they've heard of Mutota, and if they say no, teach them to untangle the misnomers. Malota becomes Mutota. Zambari becomes Zambezi. The ghost resolves into a king, and the king takes his place among the greats. History is not only what happened, it is what we choose to say out loud. Today, say this out loud. Nyatsimba Mutota, founder of the Mutapa Kingdom along the Zambezi, was one of the most consequential rulers of southern Africa in the 15th century. His state dominated inland trade, negotiated hard with coastal powers, checked a European invasion, and left a legacy that still shapes the historical imagination of the region. If you've never heard of him, that's not an accident. It's a gap. Now it's filled. And if you ever stumble on the phrase, King Malota of Zambari, again, smile. You'll know the truth hidden inside the error. A king whose real name deserves to be known. And a river whose valley once carried the wealth of a kingdom to the edge of the world.